interesting because I think, to be honest, what kind of happened to this genre is you had the massive success of Twilight. And I know that we kind of joke about that cuz it's like a meme, but it's like werewolves and vampires were kind of made like female like love interest icons. I think in a way that maybe Dracula had some of that, right? Like Dracula was kind of like had a way with the ladies, but werewolves never were like, "Oh man, they're so attractive," you know. It's just it's
Yeah, they were modernized in a way that did not flatter their horror roots.
right. And so I think the reason why you didn't see those movies uh, as successfully is that I think part of it is that they're memes, they're jokes. It's like, oh, vampires sparkle, and they're pretty boys, and you know,
Well, they've got quite a few other issues. Excuse me. But the major thing behind like I said earlier, it's the genre. It's a romance film. And yes, there are some horror elements in Twilight, but they are unintentional. I have seen bits and pieces of Twilight. There is some uh, horrific scenes in Twilight, but none of it comes at the behest of the actual monsters. Like the scene I'm specifically talking about is spoiler for a movie that most people will not see. Uh, the main protagonist, Bella, has her baby removed from her by the vampires, and they get kind of ravenous over all the blood, and she like dies on the operating table, and that's why they bring her back as a vampire. And it's like, huh, that's horrifying. But that's the only time the vampires are shown to be vampires. Otherwise, they're idealistic lovers, or
well,
they're the prim
what
and
was
proper
interesting to
Game of
me
Thrones. But yeah.
was that because vampires were so removed from their roots, nobody made the joke that Robert Pattinson went from playing a Batman to playing a Batman. Like, because there was no the bat motif didn't exist with
Yeah.
these vampires in the same way that it would in a classic way. So no, like it was funny because people were like, he's so miscast, and I was kind of like, well, in a kind of memey way, it's like perfect, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Batman is often, if we're talking about how superheroes have accidentally, or maybe even purposefully, taken away a lot of the genre tropes, Batman is often misconstrued as a vampire. Even in one of my very favorite DC films, Gods and Monsters,
mm,
it's an AU in which the three main characters, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, have completely different origins. This Batman is Kirk Langstrom, aka Man Bat, but he's a
sure,
legitimate Batman.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
he's a Batman who is a vampire, and he like requires blood to continue living. But he's a really intelligent guy. I love his character. But when you look at some of the icons of horror, Invisible Man, the werewolf, Dracula, Frankenstein, they're just they take a lot from some earlier established works.
sure.
Have you ever
Like
heard of
Mary
Bluebeard?
Shelley's. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, what?
Mary Shelley's. Have you ever heard of Bluebeard?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, Bluebeard is the I forget how many wives, but he kept taking a wife and he killed that wife, and he kept taking a wife and he killed that wife, and he kept taking a wife and he killed that wife horrifically. I do recall until the last one, where I think the last one manages to get away. It's been a hot minute since I've read Bluebeard,
Sure.
but the whole reason it's just a guy. It's just a dude. He doesn't have any supernatural powers, as far as I recall. He doesn't have any kind of anything. He's just a guy. And he's just a monster. Like, he's a legitimate monster. The point of what a lot of superhero films play around with. I'll give you a very strange example. Have you heard of the new film coming out?
Which film? What film are you saying?
Craven the Hunter.
Yes.
I don't know why they're making that, to be honest, but okay.
But he's based on a classic character, Quartermain.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, they're playing into the horror tropes better than most horror movies are these days, and that's kind of sad.
Well, so it's interesting. So like taking that character, Quartermain, okay, a guy that hunts intelligent prey, um, and wants to release somebody out onto an island to hunt him, right? So you have Quartermain, and then you have the movie like The Predator when everything was going sci-fi, and that's that character. And now
Yeah,
you have Craven, who's this comic character that wants to hunt the deadliest game, right? And that's a really common trope, right? You have like Samurai Jack has bad guys that are like that type of thing. You have a ton of reimaginings of these characters. And even Craven, like if you're looking at Craven from the Spectacular Spider-Man, he's a big lion dude. Like he
yeah. He
literally
didn't
gets
start out that
superpowers.
way because he lost versus
Right.
Spider. Like, he got humiliated by Spider-Man. He's like, well, I don't want to do that again. So even if I
Right.
lose my humanity to hunt this thing,
Sure. And so you have these characters that I think what's weird is that because the superhero genre is so popular, in some ways they're taking, because obviously these characters come from the comic books, but in some ways the superhero genre is eating other genres, and I think it's a method of survival, right? It's
yeah,
how do we keep superheroes fresh? Well, we can't do the cloth and blanket type fighting a bad guy in a big city, so we need to borrow from that. And so you see a lot of the later superhero works in what I would consider maybe like, I mean, from 2008 to present, the later works like Venom, uh, Craven, Morbius are going, hey, let's make classic, and even Blade returns for a cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine, and he's outright just a vampire hunter.
yeah. And his films are pretty horrific. But like, so another thing about genre in these films, and I agree with you that they're cannibalizing other genres to stay relevant. Whereas previously, and a lot of this happened in comic book lore and heck, even just in writing in general, you can have a different kind of look at these characters or different part of a universe, but as statist within a more horror genre or romance genre. Shows have had the romance episode, the beach episode, the horror episode, the Halloween episode. You get my idea. Why they would take these kind of tropes is to bring in new audiences that would otherwise be interested in movies that have that trope or those tropes already established.
Sure.
For example, Morbius in the spectacular, or in the 90s show, actually, he's a misunderstood monster who ruined his life. And he's a horror film come to life. And that's his whole shtick.
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
think, I think the, what was that show that came out relatively recently? Voyage of the Demeter?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with it.
It's the last Voyage of the Demeter. Let's see. Yeah. The last Voyage of the Demeter is, it's the ship that brought Dracula to the mainland. Like
Okay.
they bring his coffin from Transylvania. This is the ship that brought Dracula's coffin away from Transylvania, basically. And he wakes up on the ship, and it's a jump scare horror film, but it's modern Dracula. It's a modern depiction of Dracula. Well, I'd say a modern depiction. We had a modern depiction of Dracula. I think that was Dracula Untold. Dracula Untold, the action film and not really horror film. But yeah, basically what I'm kind of coming to, or what I'm
Oh
boiling
wow, I
down
do not
to.
like how that looks at all.
No, it looks awful. When I'm boiling down,
Yeah.
compare that to Craven the Hunter. Does that look very much different?